Hey everyone, welcome back to Cool Stuff Etc. My name is Riley, and today we have a new series here on the channel, but it is going to replace Hoobie 2. Rest in peace to Hoobie 2. No longer doing that. Those videos were way too much work on my part, and that's partially why I stopped making videos, because I just felt stressed about having to make those stupid videos. So I'm not doing that anymore. Now we're doing Cool Stuff Rewind. And Cool Stuff Rewind is just gonna be movies. Just movies. We are narrowing our focus on the channel here, for now, at least for this video. And so basically the premise is I'm gonna go through my favorites of the movies I watched in June, along with some other little surprises here and there. Not surprises, I should say, but because it's just movies, but other awards, so to speak. So yeah, why don't we just get into it? I have a decent sized stack of movies here, so stick around and you'll hear about that. The first one is gonna be the biggest surprise of the month, and I'll talk about why that is, as well as what I enjoyed about this movie, or potentially what I didn't enjoy about this movie if it was a movie that I was anticipating to love, but ended up hating. But that's not the case for this one. A Boy and His Dog. Yeah, a big surprise in the sense that I didn't know what to expect from this movie, and what it is, I ended up enjoying a lot. It definitely feels very low budget. It feels very old school. I mean, as you can see from the back of the box of the the DVD, it is very do-it-yourself looking in a sense. I don't know if that's just the people who released this, or if that's actually the people who made the movie. Probably leaning toward the former, but yeah, as you can see from the front, this is a rather kinky tale of survival. It's not that kinky. It's not that kinky. It's just that the premise is this guy in post-apocalyptic America, actually next year. He's friends with this telepathic dog named Blood, and they're the only ones who can speak to each other through their thoughts. And in exchange for food, the dog helps him find women to have sex with. And so that premise on its own is very odd. But they do a lot with it, and it goes places that you would not expect. There's a really cool action scene in it. There's some dystopian society stuff going on. There's a lot of really beautiful cinematography with the desert that they're filming in. And the sets are actually really cool too. So I just found a lot to enjoy about this movie. If you need something else to entice you, it stars Don Johnson, who you might know from Knives Out. He is, I believe, Jamie Lee Curtis's husband in Knives Out. So Chris Evans' dad in Knives Out is the star of this film. Yeah, I mean, it's very old school. Sometimes maybe some people might consider it a little cheesy, but I found a lot to enjoy. Then I don't have this movie because I watched it on Shudder, but the weirdest movie that I saw this month is a movie called Hellbender, and it's about a witch in the forest who keeps their witchiness from her daughter, and her daughter is slowly realizing that she has witchy powers. The weird thing about it is just some of the what am I trying to say? Some of the editing and some of the sequences are very psychedelic, very fast paced, bright colors flashing at you kind of a thing. So there's that stuff, and some of the effects are very low budget, but they kind of have a fun idea. And there's just certain elements of the story that I just find very idiosyncratic. Like the mother and the daughter are in a band. They make kind of somewhat experimental punk rock music together. And I was like, I don't know where that came from. And the final thing about this movie that is weird to me is, not a bad weird though, is that this is actually a family affair. Basically, the directors of this movie are the mom and daughter in the movie, as well as another guy who he's in the movie, but I don't remember who he is exactly. and there's another daughter, real life daughter, who's also in the movie. So basically, this family made this movie together, and I thought that was both cute and weird, but weird good. The movie is okay. The acting is not great until closer to the end, and it's, I don't know. It just, there wasn't much in the way of like, I don't know, nothing much to keep my attention fully, but I did enjoy it, and I think it's worth a watch. Just know going in that it's a little like low budget and kind of, weird. I had an idea for Cool Stuff Rewind, which is that, most of the awards, quote unquote, would be kind of static, but there would be one that changes every single time, so I could talk about a movie that I want to talk about. So this time, it's going to be, the random award is going to be the worst sequel that ruins a franchise. or I shouldn't say ruins a franchise, but it shits on the memory of that franchise. That's Mission Impossible 3. I mentioned in a previous video that I have been trying to watch all the movies before the new one comes out. I don't know if I'll have time to do that before the new one comes out because I just can't find the other ones for cheap, and I don't really want to rent them if I can just buy them for like $3 or $4. But regardless, I did watch 1, 2, and 3, and 1 and 2 greatly enjoyed, and then this one is a steaming pile of garbage. This movie, just like, especially after having watched 1 and 2 in such recent memory, like, how can you go from those movies and then make something like this, where the action is so intelligible, the camera work is awful, the movie looks like garbage, everything's bathed in this yellow, like, it's like the way they do that in like shows and movies for like filming in foreign countries where everything's like really yellow, but they just do this all the time in this movie. And it just looks hideous. It looks awful. If not for Philip Seymour Hoffman, this movie would be like irredeemable, essentially. With that being said, I still enjoyed it as a movie. Like, the plot's fine, but relative to every other Mission Impossible film, this is just like the bottom of the barrel. And I think people are coming around to that opinion from what I saw on Letterboxd. And my friends as well, I've seen that they also agree this is a stinker. I just wanted to bring that up. Wanted to let you know to steer clear of this. Just watch the other ones. You don't need to watch this one, really. It's not very good. Okay, the next one I also do not have, but this is going to be the worst movie that I watched this month. I don't typically like to talk about movies that I don't like on here. I think that it's best to be positive and just not really talk about stuff that you dislike as long as it's not harmful. So just, I'm going to be critical of this movie. I don't mean anything by it to the people who were involved in it or anything like that. But I don't own this one on DVD, thankfully. I did watch it on Netflix, but I did a mock-up of what I think it might look like if you bought it on DVD, so I'll just share that, because I think it's better to hold something up, while I'm talking about it. As you can see, it is The Stepfather. This is the remake from, I believe, 2009, of the somewhat classic, I believe in the 80s or maybe late 70s Stepfather movie, which I have watched and enjoyed a lot more than this. But this is the 2009 remake. Here's all the, the stuff. You can read it. But basically, yeah, it's just a terrible, awful, awfully shot, awfully acted, written. I mean, really just bad in like every regard. One of the most boring slashers you might ever see in your entire life. There's just a whole lot of nothing going on in this piece of garbage. And I mean, the cast isn't bad. Like, you would think with the actors you see, like people were definitely trying, I think, but it has no emotional weight. It's not interesting or mysterious. I feel nothing watching this movie except disdain that there's the trend of making awful remakes of movies that were perfectly fine to begin with. I don't understand remaking films that were great or even just okay or good and then making them worse, not doing anything different with the source material. Look at the Evil Dead remake if you want to know what I'm talking about, because that movie is the exact opposite of The Stepfather. But that is The Stepfather. No more negativity for the rest of the video, just good vibes. These are the best movies I watched, all ranked from 4.5 to 5 stars. on my Letterboxd. Sorry, I'll link that in the description if you care to give a shit about those. But sorry, indigestion. You know what I mean? Anyways, so I have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 10ish movies. Wow, that's pretty good. To talk about, and I'll try and tell you what I rated them. And this is in order of how I watched them this month. So, first off, we'll start with Pi by Darren Aronofsky. Rated at 5 stars. This one also could have gone in the biggest surprise section as well, because if I've not mentioned before, I've had this on DVD for probably 5 years and just did not watch it for all of that time. It is definitely the oldest DVD in my collection that was unwatched until the beginning of this month. And I'm, part of me is like, man, I really missed out on loving this movie for a long time. And the other part of me is like, actually, I wonder if young me would have appreciated this movie or have been able to appreciate this movie in the way that I can now, having watched other movies that, have taught me about filmmaking and stuff like that. Because this movie is really, really great. Very weird. It has like a very low budget feel to it. Everything's shot in black and white, and it's not a gimmick. It actually like plays into the aesthetic of the film and everything. It's really, really awesome. Basically, it's about this mathematician who's very, very, very brilliant, but he is obsessed with finding order in chaos, and just gets like swept up in a bunch of like conspiratorial stuff with different factions, and it just goes from there. It's a thriller, and it's psychological. It's kind of scary at points. The soundtrack is fucking awesome. You are gonna. I on my Letterboxd review, I said like, I feel bad just watching this dude have the worst mental breakdown of his entire life. But just like me here jamming on the couch, because the soundtrack is incredible, and you need to listen. If not watch this movie, just listen to some of the soundtrack, and that'll get you hyped to watch this movie. Darren Aronofsky. This is his first movie. He did incredible. I mean, I think Black Swan comes pretty close to being this good. Maybe even is better than this movie. But I just had found a lot to enjoy, and I think you should watch that movie. Another movie that I've already talked about, so I won't keep you here talking about this movie for much longer, but Resurrection, directed by Andrew Siemens. I don't remember. I don't know how to say it. But really great thriller / body horror film about this woman who is on the run from this man. And I shouldn't say more, actually. I think you should just watch this. Of all the movies that I'm going to recommend today, I think this might be at the top of my list. This is a 5-star movie, undoubtedly, for me. Rebecca Hall and Tim Roth are in it. They're both great, but Rebecca Hall absolutely steals the show. This movie would not be what it is if not for her. So I think you should watch this. It is on Shudder. And yeah, just an amazing performance, an amazing film, really, really well directed, lots of beautiful cinematography and lots of meaningful shots. Just lots of purpose, it seems like, and a great story too. I mean, they're doing a lot with very little in terms of the premise, but what they're doing is awesome. So definitely check that out. Also watched, Female Prisoner Scorpion, Jailhouse 41. That's the second movie in the series second of 4, and this is 5 stars too. Definitely, maybe I've discussed this. I actually don't remember, but. This is the Arrow box set edition, if you care. But yeah, sequel to Female Prisoner Scorpion 701. Another women in prison film. They're breaking out of prison again. And it's just, oh my God, it's just everything is on point. The music, the visuals, the acting, the writing. It's a perfect movie in any sense, in my opinion. I was surprised that it surpassed the first one for me, but it definitely did. I gave it 5 stars if I did not mention that already. If you're gonna watch this, I would just give a warning. There is sexual assault for sure, and some nudity. but I don't think it's as pervasive as other exploitation films tend to be. And a lot of it's very stylized too. So if you're not into that in general, then maybe steer clear. But I think this movie is incredible. I'm excited and nervous to watch the third movie because I just know it's not gonna it's not gonna live up to the hype that this movie has set. But I'm going to watch it and likely enjoy it, or hopefully enjoy it at the very least. Next up is Hellboy 2: The Golden Army. This is probably, I gave it 5, but it might be 4.5, but it's such a good movie. Very nostalgic for me. This is probably the 5th time I watched it. I forced my friend Rachel to watch it. And I don't know how she felt about it, but I certainly loved rewatching it. Free gift card, if you want the code, I'll give you the code. Here's the code. Here's the code. Here's the code. Just kidding. Tricked ya. It's expired. Anyways, Hellboy 2: The Golden Army. Directed by Guillermo del Toro, if you didn't know that. And Hellboy is one of my favorite graphic novels. So, and that was the novel. I read the novel after watching both movies, even after watching the new movie, which is dog shit. But this movie, I mean, this is like its own story. Like, it's not based on anything from the comics, at least that I'm aware of. I feel like I've read all of the Hellboy comics that he's been a part of, but maybe I'm wrong. And so it, as its own original story, or to my understanding, as its own original story, it does a lot. It creates a lot of new lore around this world, and I think that is an interesting idea to like kind of disconnect it. Even the first movie was a little disconnected from the novels, but probably, or from the graphic novels, but probably more tied to it. But this movie seems to go even further with that, with creating and incorporating different elements of folklore and a different story altogether. Like I said, although the ending is taken somewhat verbatim from the books, but regardless, the acting is great. Everyone is perfectly cast. Even Seth MacFarlane is in this as this German dude, and I mean, he's not trying to be funny. He's actually just acting. Like, he's not trying to be comedic at all, and he does a great job. The movie looks great. The effects actually all hold up. Even the digital effects, I didn't find them to be distracting or look poor at all. And of course, the practical effects are amazing. The creature designs are awesome. They just put so much heart and soul into this movie. And if you haven't seen it, I recommend watching it. You don't have to watch the first one. I think the first one's definitely not nearly as good as this one is, in my opinion. But you could just probably start with this if you wanted to. Next up, okay, this isn't a double feature, but I'm only talking about a specific movie in a specific segment. Although Metropolis is great and you should watch it, Memories is an anthology film directed by, I think several other people are like directing the 3 stories. The one in particular that I'm talking about is Magnetic Rose, which is directed by Koji Morimoto, who worked on The Animatrix, which I have not seen, but we'll see hopefully soon. Excuse me. And I mean, the other 2 shorts are good. I definitely enjoyed them, especially the third one is better than the second one, just because of the look of it, the style. But so overall, I gave Memories a 4 stars. But if it was just Magnetic Rose on its own, it would be a 5-star easily. It is one of the most beautifully animated and drawn films I've ever seen in my life. The story is very mysterious. The sci-fi setting is awesome, and how it clashes with like the old, I don't know if it's Victorian or what era you would call it, but the old sort of aristocratic setting is really interesting. The plot itself has a lot of emotional weight to it. Very tense, sometimes a little scary, creepy, and also just sad in general. I don't want to say much because I don't want to spoil it. So even if you don't watch Memories, watch Magnetic Rose. It's about 45 to 50 minutes, I believe, but you will not regret it. It is great. And if you have time, watch all of Memories, because I think the other 2 shorts do hold up. Like, they do stand on their own to some degree. They're just nowhere near as good as Magnetic Rose. All right, School of Rock. Ultimate comfort movie, one of my favorite comfort movies for sure. Loved this movie as a kid. My dad is a classic rocker guy, so I was, of course, indoctrinated into that sort of thing as well. And this movie is great. He's Jack Black, so what can you say? The kids are all really, really well characterized and pretty well acted for the most part, I would say. Joan Cusack, Joan Cusack is also great in this movie. I'm really enjoying her as of late. I've seen her in a couple other things, like in the Shameless show, and she's just a really talented actress that I don't think gets enough credit. But basically, this is just a story of a guy. He's like a total down on his luck, like loser dude. But he loves music, he loves rock and roll, and he gets the opportunity to tutor these kids and make a band with them. And it's just, as an educator too, it's just very meaningful for me. And the ending always gets me butterflies because it's just so great. Definite 5 stars. Give it a watch. All right. Talked earlier about Mission Impossible 3 as being a pretty bad movie, but now I'm here to talk to you about Mission Impossible 2, a really, really great movie. I give it 4.5 stars. It is directed by John Woo and stars the inimitable Tom Cruise. You know, he's one of those guys like Brad Pitt to me where I was always like, they're talked about a lot and they're really famous and everyone knows them, but do they have any substance? And after watching more of these movies, Tom Cruise, he's got it. He has the star quality. He is famous for a reason, even though he's a weirdo Scientologist. He's famous for a reason. He's dedicated. He loves movies. So, shout out Tom Cruise. Shout out Tom Cruise. Stop being a weirdo. This movie's awesome. It is very different from any of the other Mission Impossibles, and I think that's why a lot of people dislike it, or at least according to Letterboxd, it is one of the least favored films in the series. But I think that the reason it stands out is because it's directed by John Woo, who's coming from a different background, and so American audiences might not have a connection with the style of filmmaking that he's going for, which is a bit over the top. It's a bit silly sometimes. But the film, the way that he shoots the movie, the way that it's edited, and just the shots that he chooses to use are incredible. American filmmakers are not doing it like this. So I just think for that reason and that reason alone, it's definitely worth a watch. But it's actually a pretty compelling spy movie as well. So I think it's great. All right, Blade Runner. Rewatched this because it was Blade Runner's birthday this past month. And as a side note, it was pretty eerie living in Michigan to watch this movie and then step outside the next day and everything has descended into a cloud of somewhat thick smog, much like in this movie, although to a much bigger degree in this movie, but just kind of a scary, prescient thing that Philip K. Dick thought of and utilized in his writing and has sort of come true to even to a lesser extent. But this could be us soon. Anyways, classic sci-fi cyberpunk movie based on a classic sci-fi novel. I think it's one of those adaptations that I'll open this and show you. It's one of those adaptations that I think definitely diverts from the somewhat at least from the intention of the novel, or at least to my recollection, it kind of does, but it stands on its own as a meaningful, well-made piece of art. I did watch the final cut, Ridley Scott's final cut from 2007. So I don't actually know if I've ever seen the original theatrical cut, and I kind of want to watch it at some point, but I don't know, I was just feeling like watching the final cut this time, so regardless, it's even on this is probably my 3rd or 4th watch of this movie. Even now, it's still, the story and the characters are still very confusing because they're so complex and there's a lot of interpretation left up to the audience. So I think it's just a movie that rewards rewatches. It rewards analyzing and looking into and reading the original novel and trying to connect the dots there. But even on its own, as just a totally visual experience, it is very well shot. The sets and the world they've created are so enrapturing, if that's a word I can use. Just everything looks wonderful. They put it all out on display for the world to see, and they really paid off. I don't know what the budget was for this movie, or if it made its budget back, which I somewhat kind of doubt, just because this is such a weirdo movie. But yeah, it's great. If you haven't seen it, watch it. So I think I gave it 4.5 stars. Not quite 5. I'm still trying to piece this puzzle together. I think I need to watch the director's commentary. 2 more left. This one is 7 Psychopaths, directed by Martin McDonagh, who you might know from 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri, or In Bruges, or another film that I can't think of right now. But this movie also stars Colin Farrell, much like In Bruges, but also stars Christopher Walken, who's great in this movie, Woody Harrelson, who's great in this movie, and Sam Rockwell, who's also great in this movie. And this movie is just one of those like classic sort of crime movies. This used to be a Blockbuster DVD, which is very sad. One of those classic like crime movies. It's about this screenwriter, Colin Farrell, who gets wrapped up in this like dog stealing business, and this mob boss like wants his dog back and will go to any means to do it. But there's sort of a meta narrative going on with the screenwriting and the movie he's writing also being called 7 Psychopaths, and just a very eclectic cast of characters coming together and being part of this wild story that goes places you won't guess or won't expect. And so, I think my cats are scratching at the door to get in. Anyways, it's very, very well written and well acted. It's a hilarious movie. Sometimes I do think it leans a little too into some of the edgier inclinations of white guy comedy. So just know that going in. But it's actually not as bad as it might sound. And I promise you'll really enjoy this if you're into sort of, I guess you could say, somewhat Tarantino-esque writing and style, but certainly its own thing, and certainly, valid on its own accords. All right, and last but not least, I have a movie that also was a contender for biggest surprise, but ultimately I wanted to talk about this in this section and save it for last. So that is Suspect Zero. This is directed by E. Elias Merhige. Don't know how to pronounce your name. I am sorry. But if you are not familiar with that name, that is the person who directed Begotten, which is this somewhat well-known, artsy, creepy movie. Very experimental in style. And I having found that out, that he directed that movie and this movie, I was like, what does a movie directed by a guy who made that movie with a big studio budget and backing behind it look like? And it looks like this. And it's actually really interesting how his very artsy inclinations worm their way into this movie and make this movie like a totally unique experience. From the cover, you might just guess that it's kind of a Seven clone or Seven, very, very Seven inspired, or even a Seven ripoff. But it's not, although the story is at its very most basic premise is the same, where there's a killer and they're tracking him down, sort of a thing. But there's just a lot here that's really great in terms of the filmmaking. Aaron Eckhart is pretty good. His descent into madness is pretty interesting to watch, and Ben Kingsley too is very enthralling as the killer. Carrie-Anne Moss, who's from The Matrix, is in this, but is not as utilized as well as you might hope she would be. She's really primarily featured earlier on, and then later on she just pops in and out. But excuse me, what can you do? Yeah, the mystery itself is actually really interesting. Basically, the premise is that Ben Kingsley is going around killing dudes who are killers, and he's trying to track down what is Suspect Zero, which is basically origin of evil in a sense. This basically Suspect Zero is a serial killer who is like evading the authorities and killing on a huge spree without being caught for a long period of time. And so if that sounds interesting to you, I think you should check it out. It is on HBO Max, so it's pretty readily watchable. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere else for free, but yeah, give it a try. It is definitely a weirdo movie. I think that some of the choices may be a little dated, not in terms of like sensibilities, but in terms of the filmmaking can kind of come off a little dated. But I just really enjoyed it, and I was not expecting to love it as much as I did. And so yeah, that's Suspect Zero. Well, that'll do it for today's, or I should say this month's Cool Stuff Rewind. Hopefully you stuck through the whole thing, and if you did, I appreciate that. I hope I didn't bore you. Yeah, so we'll be here next month again. We'll do Cool Stuff Rewind again in July, and hopefully for the foreseeable future. So yeah, again, thanks for sticking around. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, you can give it a like or a dislike. They're actually equal in the eyes of YouTube. So do whatever you will with that information, and I will catch you next time. See you, everybody.